There's something deeply unsettling about the silence inside a car at night. You're locked in a small space with a stranger, surrounded by darkness, heading to unknown places. For most Uber drivers, it's just a job, a routine. But sometimes, that silence hides something else. A shadow, a secret, a scream waiting to happen. And when the doors close, there's no easy escape. Rideshare apps were created for convenience, but they've also become the backdrop for some of the most disturbing stories in modern times. Behind the wheel, drivers encounter every type of person, joyful, angry, lost, strange, and sometimes dangerous. Most stories are never told, but the ones that are, they stay with you. They crawl under your skin and linger in the rearview mirror. Tonight we explore 5 terrifying encounters told by Uber drivers who lived through moments that pushed them to the edge of reality. These are not urban legends. These are real experiences, fragments of nights when evil took the passenger seat. From ghostly figures to murderous clowns and twisted minds, these stories remind us that monsters don't always hide in the woods. Sometimes they ride with you. What would you do if the person behind you whispered something chilling? If a pickup turned out to be a trap? If you looked into your mirrors and no one was there anymore? These questions aren't hypothetical for the people in this video. They are memories. Nightmares wrapped in GPS coordinates and 5-star ratings. As you watch, remember, all it takes is one ride to change your life or end it. A missed detail, a wrong turn, a voice that fades without warning. These stories will make you think twice before stepping into a stranger's car or inviting one into your world. Because the scariest part of the road isn't what's ahead, it's what's already sitting behind you. So buckle up, check your mirrors, and turn on the lights. This ride isn't safe, and the meter is running. These are the 5 true Uber horror stories you were never supposed to hear. It was a regular Friday night in Los Angeles when I received a ride request in a quiet residential area. The client's name was Valeria, and the app said she'd be waiting outside her house. I arrived on time, lights on, and waited at the curb for several minutes. No one came out. I messaged her twice and even called, but there was no answer. Just when I was about to cancel, I noticed a shadow in the upstairs window. At first, I assumed it was her waving or checking to see if I had arrived. It felt normal enough, so I stayed a few extra minutes just in case. But the figure didn't move again. It just stood there, like it was staring. I thought maybe she changed her mind or was getting ready. Eventually, I gave up and cancelled the ride. I drove off, annoyed but unconcerned. That window figure stayed in the back of my mind all night. The next morning, I got a call from the LAPD that chilled my blood. They said my car had been spotted on security footage near a crime scene. It was the same address as the night before. They asked me to come down to the station and explain why I was there. I told them everything and even showed my app history. The officers were polite but visibly tense. Valeria had been murdered, brutally, not long after I left. They believed the killer was already inside the house when I arrived. That silhouette in the window? It wasn't her, it was him watching me, deciding whether to come down or let me go. My presence might have thrown him off, or maybe I was just lucky he didn't need another victim. They showed me the security, footage from a neighbor's house. It showed my car parked in front of the house, lights on, but more disturbing was what it captured after I left. A man exited the front door calmly, with a plastic bag in hand. He looked directly at the camera and smiled. That same stillness I saw in the window, cold, calculating. Days passed. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how close I was to death. I even imagined what would have happened if I had gotten out of the car, knocked on the door. Would he have invited me in? Would I have made it out? The idea that my hesitation saved my life haunts me more than anything. I began checking every ride twice. I avoided night shifts. I kept my doors locked between pickups. The illusion of safety that used to come with driving was gone. Every glance in the rearview mirror felt like a countdown. Every silence from a passenger made my stomach tighten. That night turned my car into a coffin on wheels. One night, a detective followed up with me. They caught the guy. Turns out he had killed before. A serial predator who used dating apps to find victims. Valeria wasn't his first. But I might have been next. That shook me harder than the murder itself. I realized I'd seen evil with my own eyes and survived. The detective thanked me for my help and said something I'll never forget. Sometimes fate gives you a window into hell, just so you remember how thin the glass is. That phrase stuck with me. I still drive, but something inside me changed forever. You don't forget a killer's stare, especially when it's aimed right at you. And to this day, I wonder if he ever saw me as a threat or just another passing car. Either way, I'll never forget that window, that shadow, and the silence that followed, because in that moment, death stood still and watched me drive away. It was late October, and Halloween was just a few days away. I was driving for Uber in a small town outside San Diego. Around midnight, I got a request from a man named Dave, heading to an address deep in the hills. When I arrived, he was all ready. Outside, dressed as a clown, red wig, white face paint, oversized shoes. I thought it was just someone heading to a costume party. He got in without saying a word, just nodded and grinned. His suitcase was old and beat up, with dried mud along the bottom. I joked, "Nice costume," but he didn't respond. Instead, he pulled a small balloon animal from his pocket and set it on the dash. I chuckled nervously, unsure if he was playing a prank or just weird. The road ahead was dark, winding, and empty. As we drove deeper into the woods, I started to feel uneasy. The guy kept humming a tune under his breath, something childish and out of place. At one point, he whispered, "You ever wonder what happens when kids disappear?" I laughed awkwardly and said, "You mean like Halloween horror movies?" He didn't answer, just kept smiling into the dark. I glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes didn't blink much. They were fixed on me. His smile never moved, like it was painted on for real. I considered ending the trip, pretending to have car trouble, but the location was so isolated I feared I'd be stranded with him, so I kept driving, checking my phone's GPS every minute. Eventually, we reached a dilapidated cabin with no lights and no cars outside. "This it?" I asked. He finally spoke. "Yeah, this is where the laughter ends." I froze. He got out slowly, dragging the suitcase behind him, and walked into the woods instead of the house. I waited for a moment, then hit the gas and got out of there. The next day, while scrolling through local news, I saw his face on a report. "Suspect at large in child disappearance case," the headline read. He had escaped custody weeks earlier and was last seen in clown makeup. My heart dropped. I called the police immediately, reported the ride, the address, everything. They took it seriously. The detectives said I was lucky. They believed he had been living off-grid, possibly luring kids into the woods. That suitcase. They suspected it held trophies or worse. I kept thinking about that balloon animal. A twisted joke from a twisted mind. That stupid little balloon sat on my dashboard for hours before I realized it was gone. I replayed every second of that ride in my head. His humming, his silence. The phrase, "where the laughter ends." It didn't feel like a Halloween prank anymore. It felt like something dark had ridden in my back seat. Something that smiled too wide and spoke too little. Something that almost didn't leave. I stopped driving at night after that. Too many shadows, too many unknowns. Every time I see a clown now, on TV, in a store, even in a kid's book, I feel my chest tighten. I used to think monsters wore masks. Now I know sometimes the mask is all there is. It was a foggy Wednesday evening when I got a ride request from someone named Mateo. The pickup location was an old street near the train station. Abandoned buildings, broken lamps, the kind of place people avoid. I arrived and saw a young man standing silently under a flickering streetlight. He wore a hoodie and jeans, hands in his pockets, head low. I called out his name, and he nodded slowly before getting in. He didn't speak. Not a word. I asked if the destination was correct, and he just gave a slight nod again. I figured he was tired, maybe having a rough night. But there was something strange in the air, like the temperature dropped a few degrees when he got in. My radio started acting up too, crackling with static, even though the signal was fine earlier. As we drove, I kept glancing at him through the rearview mirror. He sat rigid, never moving, staring at the back of the passenger seat. His reflection in the mirror seemed off, just a little behind where he actually was. I tried not to freak myself out. "You okay back there?" I asked. No reply. Just silence and the hum of the tires on the road. Halfway through the trip, I got a message on the Uber app. "Hey, I'm still waiting at the pickup spot. Are you close?" My heart skipped a beat. The message was from Matteo, the same name, as the guy in my back seat. I looked again in the mirror. The back seat was empty, completely empty. My chest tightened. I nearly swerved the car. I pulled over, turned on the lights, and checked the back seat in a panic. No one. The door hadn't opened. No weight shifted. Nothing. The air was cold and my arms were covered in goosebumps. I sat there for a minute, staring at the empty seat where someone had just been. I checked the app history. The ride had already started. I called the real Matteo, who confirmed he was still waiting near the train station. I apologized and cancelled the trip, making up an excuse about car trouble. But inside I was shaken to the core. Who or what had I picked up? I didn't tell him what happened. Who would believe me? Even I barely believed it. I drove straight home. Every bump in the road felt louder. Every shadow felt closer. I locked my car doors and checked them twice. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing faint knocks, or maybe tap, like someone wanted to come in. But there was no one outside, just the cold and that strange static from the radio. The next day, I drove past the same street again, in daylight. I found a small memorial under the flickering streetlight. Candles, flowers, a photo of a young man. Matteo, the same face. He had died there 2 weeks earlier, hit by a car that fled the scene. Locals said he still waited there, hoping to finish the ride that never came. I never accepted another ride from that part of town. Some passengers are lost, others are stuck. But the worst ones, they don't even know they're gone. I still check my rearview mirror sometimes, just in case, because some nights the back seat doesn't feel as empty as it looks. It was a calm Sunday afternoon when I got a ride request from a woman named Dolores. The pickup address was in an old neighborhood that looked frozen in time, peeling paint, rusted gates, and thick ivy on the walls. When I arrived, she was already waiting outside, well-dressed for her age, holding 2 small suitcases. She greeted me warmly with an old-fashioned charm and asked for help carrying the bags inside. I hesitated, but agreed. She said her husband couldn't help her. He had weak knees. Inside, the house was like a museum, antique furniture, thick curtains, dusty photo frames. The air smelled like mothballs and something else, something dry and old. Dolores guided me to the bedroom where the second suitcase was. That's when I saw him. He was sitting in an armchair facing the window. At first glance, he looked like he was asleep. But then I noticed the color of his skin, grayish, shriveled, like leather, left in the sun. His eyes were half open, glassy, unmoving. I froze. Dolores smiled and said, "He doesn't talk much anymore, but he's still good company." My blood ran cold. I realized then, he wasn't alive. Not remotely. He had been dead for a long time. His body was dry, preserved like something from a horror movie. I stood there speechless as Dolores chatted casually about the weather and their upcoming trip. She didn't seem disturbed at all. She was calm, loving even. Like this was normal. I dropped the suitcase by the door and backed away, heart racing. "Mom," I said, "I think something's wrong with your husband." She looked confused. "Wrong? Oh no, dear. He's just quiet today. Aren't you, Carino?" She walked over and patted his arm gently. It made a soft, cracking sound, like dry wood. I nearly vomited. I left the house as fast as I could, got into my car and locked the doors. I called the non-emergency police line and explained everything I saw. The dispatcher went silent for a moment before saying, "We've had calls about that house before." They sent a patrol. I waited down the street, watching the front door, hands trembling. Later, an officer told me she had been living with the corpse for over 6 months. She refused to let him go. When the coroner arrived, she screamed and clung to the body, refusing to believe he was gone. Grief had driven her into denial, and then into something much darker. I felt like I had stepped into someone's personal nightmare. For days, I couldn't stop imagining that brittle face, those sunken eyes. It made me question every kind old lady I picked up after that. Were they all okay? Were they living in their own memories, or worse? Sometimes I'd glance at a passenger and wonder, how much do we really know about the people we drive? I started, refusing pickups that asked for help inside. Too risky, too strange. That house taught me something. The scariest things aren't always ghosts or killers. Sometimes it's love stretched so far by loss that it snaps and becomes something unrecognizable, something that clings to the dead and calls it devotion. And now, whenever I pass that street, I speed up. I don't look at the windows. I don't want to know if she's still there talking to an empty chair, or worse, if something is answering back. It was a humid summer night when I accepted a request near the city's nightlife district. 3 people got in, 2 guys and a girl. The men were loud and joking, clearly drunk. The girl, however, seemed different. She was silent, slumped in the middle seat, eyes half open. I asked if everything was all right. One of the guys chuckled and said, "She just had too much fun." I wanted to believe that, but something in her eyes felt wrong, unfocused, like she wasn't really there. Her head leaned to the side, and she mumbled something I couldn't understand. Her dress was torn slightly at the shoulder, and she didn't react when I hit a pothole. My gut twisted. I asked for confirmation of the drop-off. One guy leaned forward and whispered, "Just drive, man." The destination was a beach house, nearly 40 minutes away. As we drove, the mood in the car grew darker. The men started whispering to each other, laughing under their breath. I kept glancing at the girl. She wasn't moving, no reaction, no blinking. My instincts screamed that something was very wrong. I started looking for excuses to stall, pretending to miss turns or slow down near police stations. I managed to text the emergency line through the Uber app, giving my location and details of the passengers. No response yet. We reached a deserted road near the coast. Trees lined both sides, no lights. The guy in the front turned to me and said, "You can stop up ahead. We'll take her from there." That sentence hit me like a brick. I parked, pretending to adjust the GPS. "Hey," I said, "she doesn't look good. Maybe I should take her to the hospital instead." Both men turned cold instantly. "Mind your business," one growled. "Just drive off when we get out." I nodded, heart pounding. The moment they opened the door, I slammed the car into reverse and peeled out, tires screeching. I drove straight to the nearest police station. Breath shaking, I explained everything. Officers acted fast. They found the girl 15 minutes later, still in that beach house, alone. She had been drugged, barely conscious. The 2 men were gone, vanished into the night, but at least she was alive. The cops said I likely saved her life. The girl's family contacted me a week later. They cried through the phone, thanking me over and over. They said she'd gone out to meet friends but never showed up. I never met her again. I didn't want to. I couldn't bear the thought of what almost happened, but I kept her voice, barely a whisper, etched in my memory. Since then, I've trusted my instincts more than ever. If something feels wrong, I act. No second guessing. That night taught me that evil doesn't always shout. It can laugh, joke, and sit quietly beside you in the back seat. All it takes is one wrong turn for someone to disappear forever. And every time I pass that road near the beach, I remember her, slumped, silent, and nearly lost. I remember the laughter of men who had no conscience, and I remember how a simple decision to listen to a gut feeling can save a life, maybe even your own. When the engine goes silent and the streetlights fade, what remains are the memories, raw, chilling, and impossible to forget. For these drivers, what began as ordinary shifts turned into encounters with the unexplainable, the cruel, and the deadly. The back seat became a space of secrets, and each turn of the wheel led them deeper into someone else's nightmare. What we've heard tonight isn't fiction. It's a warning with wheels. Each of these 5 stories leaves a trace, something that clings to the edges of your thoughts long after the screen fades to black. The killer behind the curtain, the clown with a suitcase full of horrors, the phantom who vanished without a sound, the woman in denial of death, and the girl almost stolen by monsters in disguise. Their faces stay with you. Their silence echoes, These tales are not just stories, they're survival accounts, evidence that danger often wears a mask of normalcy. We expect horror to come, loudly with music and screams, but real terror often arrives quietly, dressed as just another ride. The most terrifying thing, most drivers won't even realize they're in a horror story until it's too late. Maybe you've taken 100 rides without incident. Maybe you're reading this thinking, that could never happen to me. But danger doesn't ask permission. It doesn't announce itself. It slips into the seat behind you with a polite smile or no words at all. And sometimes, it never leaves. So whether you're a driver or a rider, remember this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't wait for confirmation. Lock the doors, make the call, turn around. Because in the world of rideshare horror, it's not just about reaching the destination, it's about making it there alive. If these stories disturbed you, they did their job. Share them, warn others, and next time you hear that notification sound, just make sure the person you're picking up is really who they say they are, because the scariest passenger might not be the one you see, it might be the one you never noticed at all.